All right, Algebra 1, I'm back. A couple more videos to go. Today we are focusing on the quadratic formula. Okay, it's another way to solve quadratic equations if you cannot factor them. So that's the biggest thing I want you guys to see. If you cannot factor a quadratic equation, you have to use the quadratic formula, which is given to us here. So we've got it. You guys can read. I just want to jump straight in to example number 1 to show you the process that I want you guys to take when doing these problems. So the first thing that I'm going to do is find what my A is, find what B is, and find what my C is. Well, if you remember the standard form, we've got ax squared plus bx plus c. That's where I'm finding my A, B, and C. So a is the number in front of x squared, and if there's not a number there, it's just 1. B is -5, and C is -14. So I'm going to use each of these numbers to find what my roots are and what my zeros are, just plugging them in. So the first one, I've got -b, which my b is already negative, so it's going to end up changing it to a positive. But then again, I have my plus or minus, then I have my radical. The first thing under my radical is b squared, so that's -5 squared. Minus 4, okay, that 4 is given in the formula, so that number doesn't change. And we're going to multiply it by our a, which is 1, and c, which is -14. Okay, and that is all over. All of this is over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, so that's my formula. I set it up. Well, the next thing I want to do is simplify it as much as I can. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find what -5 squared is and what -4 times 1 times -14 is. So I'll have 5 plus or minus radical 25 plus 56, because a negative times a negative gets you a positive. And all of that's over 2. So all we have to do next is combine them. So we've got 5 plus or minus radical 81. I just get that from doing 25 plus 56. All that's over 2. Next step is I need to simplify this radical 81. So in your calculator or in your head, you can see that radical 81 gets you 9. So I have 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. Well, one thing I want you guys to see is this is going to break up into 2 answers. Because in one case, we're going to have a 5 plus 9 divided by 2. And in another case, we're going to have a 5 minus 9 divided by 2. Okay, so these are 2 different answers that are going to be our set of solutions. So for our first one, we got 5 plus 9, and then we divide that by 2, and we get 7. And then we have 5 minus 9, divide that by 2, and you get -2. Okay, so our set of solutions here is 7 and -2. So that is my answer. Okay, so we plug it in first, and then we kind of do our math to figure it out. And a lot of times you can just go ahead and plug that straight into the calculator, but I see a lot of students end up making mistakes on how they enter these problems, which could hurt you in the long run. Alright, so we're going to do that same process for number 2. So first thing I'm doing is labeling what my A is, my B is, and what C is. So A is 1, B is -4, and C is a +4. So first thing I have is a -B. So I have a -4. Then I've got plus or minus. My radical, first thing under the radical is my -4 squared. And I'm subtracting my 4 and multiplying it by my A times C. And all of that is over my 2 times 1. So your next step is to find what all this math under the radical. So we have a +4 because a negative times a negative gets us a positive. And next thing we're doing is under the radical. So we have plus or minus radical. -4 squared gives us 16. And -4 times 1 times 4 gets us a -17, or 16, excuse me. And all of that is over 2. Okay, so this is where we're at next. Next step, continue simplifying what's under the radical. So I have 4 plus or minus, well, 16 minus 16 gives me 0. And I'll divide that by 2. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0, so this cancels out. So I have 4 divided by 2, and that just gives us 2. So my answer here is 2. Okay, so those are my first two problems. I'm trying to break it down as much as I can for you guys. Well, let's go ahead on to example number 3. Go to example number 3. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label my A, B, and C. So A is 2, B is 2, and C is negative 12. Well, remember our formula. I'll write it here in the middle. We've got negative B plus or minus radical B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So there, it's there for us to reference. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug those numbers in. So I have a negative 2 first, plus or minus, got my B squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 2, and C, which is a negative 12. Excuse me, I didn't say that before. It's a negative 12. And all of that is over my 2 times A, which is 2. So next thing I'm doing is I'm simplifying what's under my radical. So I've got a negative 2 plus or minus radical. I've got 4 plus 96, and all of that is over 4. All that is over 4. So I'm going to continue simplifying that radical. So I have negative 2 plus or minus radical 100, because I added 496, and all of that is over 4. Well, once again, I'm going to keep simplifying this radical. I'm going to see what radical 100 is. It's 10. So now I have negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 4. And that's where this breaks off into 2, where you have your negative 2 plus 10 divided by 4, and where you have your negative 2 minus 10 divided by 4. Well, we're going to go ahead and find those values. So negative 2 plus 10, then we divide by 4, that gives us 2. And then negative 2 minus 10 divided by 4 gives us a negative 3. So my set of solutions here are 2 and negative 3. Perfect, so there's that one. Let's go ahead and try number 4. My first step, I'm going to find what my A, B, and C are. So A is 2, B is negative 3, and C is negative 5. Well, let's go ahead and plug it into our equation. So we have negative B, which is already negative. Then we've got plus or minus our radical. Negative 3 squared minus 4 times our A, which is 2, times our C, which is negative 5, all over 2 times A, which is 2. So let's go ahead and simplify that down more. So under this radical, let's see, we'll still have a 3 here, because a negative times a negative gets us a positive. Then plus or minus, negative 3 squared gives us 9, and negative 4 times 2 times negative 5 gives us a positive 40. And all of that's over 4. Well, let's keep simplifying this. We've got 3 plus or minus radical 49 over 4. We are not done yet. We know that radical 49 gets you 7. So it gets you a 7. All of that's over 4. And this is where it breaks off into 2, where you'll have 3 plus 7 divided by 4, and 3 minus 7 divided by 4. So our first one, we got 3 plus 7 divided by 4. That gives you 5 over 2. And 3 minus 7 divided by 4 gives us a negative 1. So our set of solutions here is 5 over 2 and negative 1. Alright, what I want you guys to do is go ahead and pause this video and do 5 and 6 by yourself. And then once you guys are completed, go ahead and hit play and check your answers. If you get them incorrect, please let us know. Alright, here are our answers for 5 and 6. So you got to find your A, B, and C first. That's the biggest thing. And then plug them into your formula. So make sure you have that formula close with you or you have it memorized at some point. There are some catchy songs that we might show you as the week goes on. But you should have gotten x is a set of numbers with -1 and -3. And x is 5/2 and -4 for number 6. So we got 2 more problems that I want to do, 7 and 8, because these are set up a little differently. So our goal is to make sure that it equals 0. That's what we have to do before we do anything. So in both of these problems, they are not equal to 0. So to do that, we have to move everything over, and we don't want our a to be negative, because then it just makes it messy. So we have an x squared on this side, so we have to move over this 9x and this 20. So to do that, we have to do the opposite of what it's doing. So we have x squared, but we're going to minus 9x on both sides. So that's where we get our minus 9x. And then we're going to add 20 to get rid of it and put it on the other side. So plus 20, and that equals 0. So now we would find our a, b, and c with those numbers. So a equals 1, b equals -9, and c equals 20. Okay, so there's that one. And then for our second one, we do that same process. We need to move over the 6 and the -3. So we'd subtract 6x and add 3. So we'd have 3x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. And then we could find our a, b, and c, where a is 3, b is -6, and c is 3. So what I want you guys to do now, pause the video again, finish these 2 problems, and check your answer. Alright, here is the work for the last 2 problems. And as you guys can see, the biggest thing is just making sure you're plugging in those numbers correctly and simplifying them correctly. Be sure to watch your negatives. But for this final answer for number 7, you should have gotten 5 and 4, and the final answer for 8, you should have gotten 1. If you're getting them wrong, feel free to pause it and see where your mistake was, or just go ahead and call one of us over and we can help you guys out. Once you guys are finished with this video and looking at these problems, go ahead and start your worksheet. One more video. Woo!